Nova's antennae twitched with excitement as her research vessel approached the abandoned human space station. As the leading xenoanthropologist from the Centauri Science Academy, she had spent years studying distant civilizations, but humans remained an enigma that fascinated her endlessly. The station's airlocks hissed open, revealing corridors filled with forgotten belongings and scattered data tablets. Nova's specialized environment suit allowed her crystalline form to move freely as she explored, her bioluminescent patches providing gentle illumination in the dim space. Recording log entry 2184, she spoke into her research device. Human Space Station Omega-7, abandoned approximately 3 Earth years ago during the Great Solar Storm, searching for cultural artifacts and data. In what appeared to be the station's library, Nova discovered a treasure trove of information. Personal journals, relationship guides, and romance novels filled the digital archives. Her 3 hearts quickened with anticipation. This was exactly the kind of raw, unfiltered cultural data she had been seeking. Fascinating, she murmured, downloading the contents into her research tablet. Humans document their mating practices extensively, yet their approach seems incredibly complex. As she began reviewing the materials, her crystalline features shifted into what her species considered a look of shock. The humans didn't just mate for reproduction. They formed deep emotional bonds, experienced something called romance, and engaged in physical intimacy for pleasure. This was unlike anything in her experience. These dates they go on, she noted, seem to be elaborate courtship rituals involving shared consumption of nutrients and entertainment activities. But why would sharing a meal lead to pair bonding? The more she read, the more questions arose. Humans wrote entire books about finding true love and maintaining relationships. They created art, music, and literature celebrating these bonds. It was so different from her species' practical approach to genetic compatibility and reproduction. Nova was particularly confused by the concept of kissing. The pressing together of mouth parts seemed unsanitary and impractical, yet humans described it as pleasurable and meaningful. She made detailed notes, determined to understand this peculiar behavior. Her research was interrupted by a notification from her ship's computer. Another vessel was approaching the station. According to the readings, it was human. Nova's heart raced. This could be her chance to observe their mating behaviors firsthand. She quickly gathered her equipment, both nervous and excited about the prospect of actual human contact. Her studies had been theoretical until now, based on historical data and abandoned artifacts. Real humans would add a whole new dimension to her research. As she made her way back to her ship's docking port, Nova reflected on her discoveries. Perhaps there was more to human mating than simple biological imperatives. Their complex emotional and social practices suggested a depth she hadn't anticipated. Additional log entry, she recorded. Hypothesis: human mating practices serve multiple purposes beyond reproduction, including social bonding, emotional fulfillment, and cultural expression. Further research required. Direct observation may be necessary for complete understanding. Little did Nova know, this encounter would lead her down a path that would challenge everything she thought she knew about relationships, love, and the universal nature of connection. The approaching human vessel turned out to be a research ship, the Stellar Pioneer, carrying a team of scientists investigating the effects of the solar storm that had forced the station's abandonment. Nova observed from her cloaked ship as they docked, her 3 hearts beating in an irregular pattern of nervousness and excitement. Through her ship's sensors, she watched the humans emerge from their vessel. Their research team consisted of 5 members, led by Dr. Thomas Reed, a distinguished astrobiologist whose papers Nova had actually studied during her preparation for this mission. They moved through the station with purpose, setting up equipment and taking readings. Nova's translator picked up their communications, and she found herself fascinated by their casual conversation. They spoke about their families back on Earth, shared jokes, and discussed something called dating apps that apparently helped humans find potential mates through their communication devices. Log entry 2185. Nova recorded. her crystalline form shimmering with interest. Humans appear to use technology not just for scientific purposes, but to facilitate their mating processes. This suggests their reproductive strategies have evolved alongside their technological advancement. As she continued to observe, Dr. Reed's team discovered her recent presence in the library. They found traces of her crystalline essence, a natural residue her species left behind, despite their best precautions. "These readings are incredible," she heard Dr. Reed say through her monitors. "This signature suggests a Centaurian presence, but they've never ventured this far into human space before." Nova's surprise at being discovered nearly caused her to reveal herself, but she maintained her composure and continued observing. The humans' reaction to evidence of alien life was remarkably measured. Professional curiosity rather than fear or hostility. While monitoring their investigation, Nova continued analyzing the relationship data she'd gathered. She was particularly intrigued by human concepts of jealousy and monogamy. The idea that humans would limit themselves to a single mate, sometimes for their entire lives, seemed both inefficient and oddly touching. Additional note, she recorded, human mating bonds appear to create strong emotional dependencies. They experience distress when their chosen mate shows interest in others, yet they celebrate this exclusivity. Further study needed to understand the evolutionary advantage of such limitations. The research team's conversations provided unexpected insights. During their breaks, they discussed their own relationships. Dr. Reed spoke about his husband back on Earth, describing their 20-year partnership with obvious affection. Another scientist, Dr. Jasmine Patel, talked about her recent divorce and the challenges of dating while pursuing a career in space. Nova found herself drawn into their personal stories, beginning to understand that human relationships were far more than just biological imperatives. They were complex webs of emotional support, shared experiences, and mutual growth. Her attention was particularly caught by a discussion about something called long-distance relationships. The concept that humans could maintain pair bonds across vast distances through communication alone was revolutionary to her understanding of their species. Hypothesis update, she noted. Human mating practices appear to transcend physical proximity. Their emotional bonds remain stable even without regular physical contact, suggesting a psychological component that may be more significant than previously theorized. As the day cycle progressed, Nova noticed something else. The humans' work efficiency seemed to improve when they discussed their personal lives. Their social bonds, even just as colleagues, created a synergy that enhanced their professional performance. Secondary observation, she added to her log. Human relationship structures may serve additional purposes beyond reproduction and emotional fulfillment. They appear to facilitate improved group dynamics and work efficiency. The human's presence had forced Nova to adjust her research methodology, but it had also provided invaluable real-time data. Their casual discussions revealed more about human mating customs than any amount of archived material could have. As she watched Dr. Reed's team prepare to end their day's work, Nova made a decision that would change the course of her research. She would need to make direct contact. Observing from a distance wasn't enough. To truly understand human relationships, she would need to interact with them directly. Final log entry for today, she recorded, her crystalline form pulsing with determination. Tomorrow, I will initiate first contact with the human research team. Their reaction to a Centaurian sci-fiseries studying their mating habits should prove informative. What Nova didn't realize was that this decision would lead to far more than just scientific discovery. It would challenge not only her understanding of human relationships, but also her own species' approach to connection and intimacy. The moment Nova decided to reveal herself to the human research team, her crystalline form pulsed with waves of blue light, a sign of nervous excitement in her species. She had prepared extensive greeting protocols based on her research, but nothing could fully prepare her for direct contact with humans. She waited until the team had settled into their morning routine before decloaking their ship and sending a standard scientific contact request to their vessel. The response was immediate. Dr. Reed's voice came through her communication system, professional but clearly excited. "This is Dr. Thomas Reed of the Earth Science vessel Stellar Pioneer. We're receiving your contact request. Are you the Centaurian who visited the library?" Nova activated her universal translator. "Affirmative, Dr. Reed. I am Nova, xenanthropologist from the Centauri Science Academy. I request permission to discuss my research with your team." The docking procedure went smoothly, and Nova found herself face to face with the humans she had been observing. Their reactions to her crystalline form were varied. Fascination from Dr. Reed, cautious curiosity from Dr. Patel, and obvious excitement from the younger researchers. "Your research," Dr. Reed began, after formal introductions were complete. "What exactly brings a Centaurian xenanthropologist to an abandoned human space station?" Nova's crystalline structure shifted slightly, her equivalent of clearing her throat. "I am studying human mating practices and relationship dynamics. Your species' approach to pair bonding is unique in our experience." There was a moment of surprised silence before Dr. Patel broke into laughter. "You mean you've been studying our romance novels and relationship guides? No wonder you're confused." "The materials I found were quite extensive," Nova replied, her form flickering with uncertainty. "Are they not accurate representations of human mating customs?" Dr. Reed smiled kindly. "They're more like idealized versions. Real human relationships are much more complex, and usually much messier." What followed was a fascinating discussion that challenged everything Nova had learned from her research. The human team shared personal stories that painted a very different picture from the archived materials she had studied. Dr. Patel spoke about her divorce, explaining how human relationships could end despite both parties' best efforts. "Sometimes love just isn't enough," she said, causing Nova's research algorithms to struggle with the concept that emotional bonds could deteriorate despite optimal conditions. One of the younger researchers, Dr. Benjamin Torres, shared his experience with online dating. "It's like having a quantum probability field of potential relationships," he explained, using scientific terms that helped Nova better understand the concept. "You never know if you're going to find your perfect match or another disappointing first date." As the conversation continued, Nova found herself sharing details about Centaurian relationship customs. She explained how her species approached reproduction through logical selection of genetically compatible partners, without the emotional complications humans seem to embrace. "That sounds so clinical," Dr. Reed commented, his expression thoughtful. "Don't you ever feel attracted to someone regardless of their genetic compatibility?" The question caused Nova's crystalline structure to pulse with an unexpected pink hue, her species' equivalent of a blush. "Such considerations would be highly irregular," she responded, though she found herself wondering about the efficiency of her species' approach for the first time. As the day progressed, Nova participated in the team's research activities, observing their interactions in a new light. She noticed how they communicated through subtle gestures and expressions, how their emotional states affected their work dynamics, and how they supported each other through both professional and personal challenges. "Your species seems to form bonds far beyond mere reproductive necessity," she noted during a break in their work. "These connections appear to serve multiple functions in your society." Dr. Patel nodded. "Love, friendship, family, they're all different kinds of relationships that make us who we are. They can be complicated and sometimes painful, but they're what make life meaningful for us." Nova recorded everything, but she found herself focusing less on the scientific aspects and more on the emotional depth of human connections. She was particularly intrigued by how humans could maintain multiple types of relationships simultaneously: romantic partners, friends, family members, each with its own unique dynamic. Log entry 2186, she recorded privately. "Human relationship structures appear to be fundamental to their species' emotional and psychological well-being. The complexity of these bonds suggests an evolutionary advantage that transcends mere reproduction." As the day drew to a close, Dr. Reed invited Nova to continue her research with their team. You could learn more about human relationships by experiencing our day-to-day interactions than you ever could from studying old documents, he suggested. Nova's form brightened with excitement at the prospect. That would be invaluable to my research. Though I must admit, my interest has become more than purely academic. Your species' approach to relationships is intriguing. What Nova didn't say was how this day had affected her personally. She had come seeking to understand human mating practices, but had instead discovered something far more profound: the possibility that her own species' logical approach to relationships might be missing something essential. As she returned to her ship that evening, Nova added one final note to her log: personal observation. Perhaps the human practice of forming emotional bonds, despite its apparent inefficiency, serves a purpose my species has yet to understand. Further research is not just scientifically necessary, but personally compelling. Over the next few weeks, Nova's research took an unexpected turn. What had begun as a scientific study of human mating practices evolved into something far more personal. Working alongside the stellar Pioneer crew, she found herself experiencing emotions that her species' logical framework struggled to categorize. Dr. Benjamin Torres had taken to teaching Nova about human music, explaining how it often expressed emotions related to love and relationships. During one of their shared breaks, he played a classical piece called Clair de Lune. Music can say things that words can't, he explained, watching as Nova's crystalline form resonated with the vibrations. Sometimes it expresses feelings we don't even know we have. Nova's structure shimmed in response to the melody. This creates unusual sensations in my crystalline matrix. It's pleasant, but difficult to quantify in my research parameters. Dr. Patel, who had been observing their interaction, smiled knowingly. Not everything about relationships can be quantified, Nova. That's something we humans learned long ago. During their daily research activities, Nova found herself paying increasing attention to the subtle dynamics between team members. She noticed how Dr. Reed's voice softened when he spoke about his husband during video calls, how Dr. Torres's crystalline readings fluctuated when Dr. Paddle smiled at him, and how the entire team's efficiency improved when they worked in harmony. Log entry 2187, she recorded one evening. Human emotional connections appear to operate on multiple frequencies simultaneously. Their impact extends beyond individual pairs to affect entire group dynamics. Most intriguingly, I find myself becoming attuned to these emotional frequencies in ways I cannot explain through traditional Centaurian science. One particular incident marked a turning point in Nova's research. During a routine maintenance check of the station's old systems, Dr. Torres accidentally triggered a power surge. Nova's crystalline structure automatically absorbed the excess energy, protecting him from harm. "You saved me," he said afterward, his heart rate still elevated from the shock. "But why?" "It wasn't a logical decision. You risked damage to your own structure." Nova's form pulsed with confusion. "I acted without analyzing the situation. The thought of you being harmed was unacceptable." This revelation troubled her. It was the kind of instinctive, emotional response that her species typically avoided. Dr. Reed, who had witnessed the incident, provided an insight that would change Nova's understanding forever. That's what humans call caring about someone. It's not logical, but it's one of our greatest strengths. Later that week, Nova received a transmission from the Centauri Science Academy. They were concerned about the direction of her research, noting that she had deviated from standard xenanthropological protocols. They suggested terminating the mission and returning for a review. The prospect of leaving filled Nova with an unfamiliar sensation of distress. During her evening log entry, her usually steady voice wavered. "The Academy's concerns are logically valid, yet I find myself resistant to ending this research. The human concept of emotional attachment may be affecting my scientific objectivity. More troubling still, I find I do not want to correct this deviation." Dr. Patel found Nova in the observation deck that evening, her crystalline form casting rainbow reflections across the walls. "Want to talk about it?" she asked, sitting beside the alien researcher. I am experiencing internal conflict, Nova admitted. My species values logic and clear purpose in all relationships. Yet here, among humans, I have formed connections that serve no clear scientific or reproductive purpose. They are inefficient, emotional, and highly satisfying. Dr. Patel laughed softly. Welcome to the human experience of relationships. They're messy, complicated, and completely worth it. The conversation that followed lasted hours, with Nova sharing her species' approach to relationships, the careful genetic matching, the logical allocation of resources, the clear definitions of every interaction's purpose. Dr. Patel, in turn, spoke about human relationships in all their chaotic glory. The chance meetings, the illogical attractions, the heartbreaks that somehow led to growth. Log entry 2188. Nova recorded after their talk. Hypothesis. The very chaos and uncertainty of human relationships may be their greatest strength. Their willingness to risk emotional damage for the possibility of meaningful connection reveals a form of courage my species had not previously recognized. The next morning, Nova sent her response to the Academy. She requested an extension of her mission, proposing a new research direction, exploring how emotional connections might benefit Centaurian society. She included data showing how human relationship patterns, despite their apparent inefficiency, created resilient social structures and promoted innovation through emotional support. As she waited for their response, Nova realized that regardless of their decision, she had been fundamentally changed by her time with the humans. She had come to study their mating practices, but had discovered something far more significant: the power of forming connections that transcended logical necessity. Final note for today, she recorded, her form glowing with newfound purpose. Perhaps the true value of relationships lies not in their efficiency or reproductive success, but in their ability to transform those who engage in them. Further research required, for both scientific and personal reasons. The Grand Assembly Hall of the Centauri Science Academy sparkled with the crystalline forms of hundreds of scientists, their structures refracting light in a dazzling display. Nova stood at the center, her own form glowing with a mix of nervousness and determination. Beside her, Dr. Reed and Dr. Torres represented the human delegation, their presence already causing ripples of discussion among the Centaurian observers. Distinguished colleagues, Nova began, her voice resonating through the crystal chamber. My research into human mating practices has led to discoveries that challenge our fundamental understanding of relationships across species. The holographic displays activated, showing data from her months of research. But instead of the expected charts and genetic compatibility matrices, the first images showed moments of human connection. Dr. Reed's joy during calls with his husband, Dr. Patel's resilience through sharing her divorce experience, Dr. Torres's quiet acts of kindness. Our species has long prided itself on logical efficiency in all things, including reproduction and social bonds. Nova continued. But my research suggests we may have overlooked crucial aspects of relationship dynamics that humans have intuitively understood for millennia. She shared her data on how human emotional bonds improved everything from work efficiency to creative problem-solving. The Centaurian scientists watched with increasing interest as she demonstrated how human relationships, despite their apparent chaos, created resilient support systems that helped individuals survive and thrive through challenges. But the most significant discovery, Nova said, her form pulsing with soft pink light, was personal. Through my interaction with humans, I experienced forms of connection that our scientific parameters never accounted for. These connections changed me, improved me, made me a more effective researcher and individual. Dr. Torres stepped forward then, sharing his perspective on how Nova's presence had affected their team. He spoke of her evolution from detached observer to trusted friend, how her unique viewpoint had helped them see their own relationships in new ways. Nova taught us that love isn't just a human emotion, he said, glancing at her with warmth. It's a universal force that can bridge even the gaps between stars. The assembly hall erupted in discussions, some skeptical, others intrigued. Nova's mentor, elder crystalline scholar Vex, raised the crucial question: how do you propose we apply these findings to our society? Nova's response was ready. I suggest a cultural exchange program, not just for scientific research, but for personal growth. Let our species learn from humans about emotional connection while sharing our knowledge of logical harmony. Together, we might achieve a balance neither species could reach alone. To demonstrate her point, she shared recordings of her own transformation, her first reaction to music, her instinctive protection of Dr. Torres, her growing understanding of human jokes and emotional subtleties. Each example showed how she had maintained her Centaurian logical foundation while expanding her capacity for emotional connection. We need not abandon our nature, she explained, but enhance it. Human relationships have taught me that the greatest discoveries often lie in the space between logic and emotion. The presentation concluded with a proposal for a joint human-Centaurian research institute dedicated to studying relationships across species. To Nova's surprise, both the Academy leadership and the human delegation showed immediate interest. Later, during the reception, Dr. Reed found Nova in a quiet corner, her form shimmering with exhaustion but satisfaction. "You've started something remarkable here," he said. "A bridge between our species built on understanding love in all its forms." "I began this research thinking I would study human mating," Nova replied, her crystal structure twinkling with amusement. "Instead, I learned that relationships, whether romantic, platonic, or professional, are about connection, growth, and the courage to be transformed by another being's presence in your life." Dr. Torres joined them, carrying the small device. "Speaking of transformation," he said, "we brought something for you." He activated the device, and the soft notes of Clair de Lune filled the air. Nova's form resonated with the music, but this time, she understood why. It wasn't just vibrations affecting her crystal structure. It was the emotion the music carried, the memory of friendship, and the promise of more discoveries to come. Log entry 2189. Final research note. Nova recorded that evening. Conclusion. Love, in all its forms, may be the most powerful force in the universe, not despite its illogical nature, but because of it. It drives us to grow, to connect, to become more than we are alone. Whether expressed through human emotion or Centaurian resonance, its essence remains the same: the profound impact we can have on each other's existence. As she looked out at the stars that evening, Nova reflected on how far she had come from her initial research question. She had sought to understand human mating, and instead had discovered universal truths about connection, growth, and the beautiful uncertainty of opening oneself to relationships of all kinds. The next day, as the human delegation prepared to return to Earth, Dr. Torres hesitated before boarding their ship. "You know," he said to Nova, "in human culture, we have a saying, 'Home is where the heart is.' I never thought I'd be explaining that to a crystalline being who ended up understanding it better than most humans." Nova's form glowed warmly. "Perhaps that's the greatest lesson of all. That understanding comes not from observation alone, but from allowing ourselves to be changed by what we study." As she watched their ship depart, Nova knew that her research wasn't ending. It was evolving, just as she had. The next chapter would bring new challenges, new connections, and new opportunities to explore the infinite ways beings could connect across the vastness of space, united by the universal experience of love in all its forms.